First Contact Protocol. The void between stars held no mercy for those who traveled it unprepared. Captain Marcus Kane understood this truth as he watched the massive alien vessel drift through the debris field of what had once been the Merchant. Convoy Harmony. His ship, the UES Defiant, maintained a cautious distance while sensors worked overtime to analyze the sleek, crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around itself. Captain, his communications officer, Lieutenant Rivera, called out, "We're receiving a transmission. It's single quotes S. different. The signal patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Marcus nodded grimly. 3 months had passed since humanity's first contact with the Zephyrian Empire, and every encounter had ended in bloodshed. The aliens seemed to view humans as nothing more than parasites infesting their ancient territories. What puzzled him most was their apparent lack of emotion. During combat, their ships moved with cold precision. Their communications were purely tactical, and their warriors fought like beautiful, deadly machines. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the speaker. She was tall and ethereal, with skin that seemed to shimmer like starlight and eyes that held the depth of nebulae. Her voice carried the weight of authority as she spoke in perfect, albeit accented, English. "Human vessel, I am War Commander Zinara of the 7th Fleet. You have entered restricted space. Surrender your ship and prepare to be processed." Marcus stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "War Commander, I'm Captain Marcus Kane of the United Earthship Defiant. We're here investigating the attack on our civilian convoy. Those were unarmed traitors' families." Zinara's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in her eyes. "Families? You speak of breeding units as if they possess individual value. This is inefficient thinking. Those people had names, dreams, children they were trying to feed," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "They weren't just breeding units. They were human beings with hopes and fears and love in their hearts." For the first time, Zinara seemed to pause. In her culture, the Zephyrians had long ago suppressed emotional responses in favor of logical efficiency. They reproduced through careful genetic planning, raised offspring in communal facilities, and assigned roles based on optimal societal function. The concept of love was considered a primitive weakness. "You claim to feel for beings not genetically connected to you," she said, her tone carrying a note of curiosity. "This is unusual," Marcus smiled sadly. "Commander, that's what makes you's human. We feel for strangers. We mourn for people we've never met, and we fight for those who can't fight for themselves. It's not weakness, it's our greatest strength." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Marcus staring at the alien ship. He didn't know it yet, but his words had planted the first seed of doubt in a mind that had never questioned the cold logic of her people. The prisoner's dilemma. The detention cell aboard the Zephyrian flagship, Eternal Void, was a marvel of crystalline architecture that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Marcus sat on what passed for a bench, his hands secured with energy shackles that hummed with barely contained power. 3 days had passed since his capture during the skirmish at Kepler Station, and he'd seen no one except the silent guards who brought him a nutritional paste that tasted like disappointment. When the cell door dissolved into shimmering particles, he expected another interrogation session with the stone-faced intelligence officers. Instead, War Commander Zinara entered alone, her presence filling the small space with an aura of controlled power. "Captain Kane," she said, her voice carrying that same emotionless tone he'd come to expect from her species. "I have questions." Marcus looked up, noting how she moved with the fluid grace of a predator. "I'm listening, Commander. During our previous encounter, you spoke of love as a motivating force. My analysts have studied your species' behavior patterns, and we find contradictions. You claim to feel for others, yet you wage war. You speak of love, yet you destroy. Explain this paradox. Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Commander, have you ever had something precious taken from you? Something you'd do anything to protect? Zinara's expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Zephyrians do not form personal attachments. They are inefficient and lead to poor decision-making. But that's exactly my point, Marcus said, leaning forward. We fight because we love. We go to war to protect the people we care about. A mother will fight like hell to protect her child. A soldier will charge into certain death to save his brother in arms. We don't fight because we're emotionless. We fight because we feel everything. This seems wasteful of resources, Zinara replied. Though her voice carried less certainty than before, Marcus smiled. Maybe, but it also means we'll never give up. When you threaten what we love, we become something more than the sum of our parts. We become dangerous. For the first time, Zinara sat down across from him. The gesture seemed strangely intimate in the crystalline cell. Your ship was outnumbered 5-1. Your crew had multiple opportunities to surrender. Yet they continued, fighting until their vessel was destroyed. This is not logical behavior. No, Marcus agreed. It's human behavior. They fought because they believed in something bigger than themselves. They fought for their families back home, for the colony ships carrying children to new worlds, for the dream of a future where humans and Zephyrians might coexist peacefully. Zinara was quiet for a long moment, her luminous eyes studying his face. You speak of dreams as if they have substance. Dreams are the most substantial thing in the universe, Commander. They're what drive us to explore, to build, to hope for something better. What drives your people? Efficiency, order, the optimization of resources and genetic potential. The words came automatically, but they sounded hollow in the confined space. Marcus nodded slowly. And how's that working out for you? Are you happy, Commander? The question seemed to strike her like a physical blow. She stood abruptly, her composure cracking for just an instant. Happiness is irrelevant. Is it? Marcus asked gently. Because from where I'm sitting, you seem pretty miserable for someone who's supposedly optimized for efficiency. The cell door reformed behind her as she left, but not before Marcus caught a glimpse of something in her eyes that looked suspiciously like confusion. Cracks in the crystal the observation deck of the eternal void offered a panoramic view of the Helios Nebula, its swirling colors painting the darkness in shades of gold and crimson. Zinara stood alone at the massive viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the crystalline surface. She'd been coming here more often since her conversations with the human prisoner, seeking solitude to process thoughts that refused to follow logical patterns. Commander, came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Sub-Commander Kelrix approaching, his movements carrying the same precise efficiency that marked all of their kind. The human tribunal has been delayed. Admiral Voss wishes to conduct additional interrogations. Zinara nodded, but her attention was divided. Kelrix, do you ever wonder what it would be like to make decisions based on something other than logic? The question clearly caught him off guard. Commander, such thoughts are ... unusual. Are you experiencing system malfunctions? Perhaps you should report to medical for neural alignment. No malfunctions, she replied, though she wasn't entirely certain. Merely curiosity. Over the past week, she'd found herself returning to the detention level far more frequently than protocol required. Each conversation with Captain Kane had revealed new layers to human psychology that challenged everything she'd been taught about inferior species. The humans fought with a passion that seemed to defy tactical sense, yet their strategies often succeeded through sheer determination and unpredictability. Commander, Kelrix continued, the prisoner has been requesting access to communication channels. He claims he wishes to contact his family before execution. Zinara felt something twist in her chest, an unfamiliar sensation she couldn't classify. His family? A mate and offspring, according to his psychological profile. The request is highly irregular and serves no tactical purpose. She was quiet for a moment, watching the nebulous colors shift and dance. Grant the request? Commander? You? Heard me, Sub-Commander. Arrange for a monitored communication channel. 30 minutes. After Kelrick's left, clearly confused by the order, Zinara made her way to the detention level. She found Kane pacing his cell, his human restlessness a stark contrast to Zephyrian stillness. Captain, she said as the cell door dissolved, you have been granted communication privileges. Kane stopped pacing, surprise evident on his face. I thank you, Commander. I wasn't sure you'd approve. It serves no tactical purpose, she said, echoing Kelrick's words. But perhaps, that is not always the primary consideration. She led him to a small communication chamber where a holographic projector hummed to life. Within moments, the images of a woman and a young girl appeared, their faces lighting up with joy and relief at seeing Kane alive. Marcus! The woman exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. Oh God, we thought we'd lost you. Daddy! The child cried, reaching toward the projection as if she could touch him. Zinara watched from the doorway, observing the interaction with growing fascination. The raw emotion in the voices, the way Kane's entire demeanor transformed, the tears that flowed freely, none of it made logical sense. Yet it was the most powerful thing she'd ever witnessed. I love you both so much, Kane said, his voice breaking. Take care of each other. Remember what we talked about being brave and kind. The call ended after 30 minutes, leaving Kane sitting in stunned silence. Zinara approached slowly, her mind racing with questions she couldn't formulate. That was inefficient, she said finally, though the words felt wrong. Kane looked up. At her, his eyes still wet with tears. Commander, that was the most important conversation of my life. If I die tomorrow, I'll die knowing I told them I loved them one last time. For the first time in her existence, Zinara felt something crack inside her carefully ordered mind. It wasn't malfunction, it was awakening. The heart of war, the tactical briefing room aboard the Eternal Void, buzzed with the cold efficiency typical of Zephyrian military planning. Admiral Voss, a towering figure whose presence commanded absolute attention, stood before a holographic display showing the human fleet's positions near the Arcturus system. His silver eyes swept over the assembled officers with mechanical precision. Intelligence confirms the humans are planning a major offensive, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Their fleet composition suggests they intend to break through our blockade and establish a supply line to their outer colonies. Zinara sat at the curved table, her attention divided between the tactical display and the growing turmoil in her thoughts. The past days spent observing, Captain Kane had fundamentally altered her understanding of human behavior. Where her people saw chaos and inefficiency, she was beginning to recognize patterns of sacrifice, loyalty, and love that made humans far more dangerous than their military capacity suggested. War Commander Zinara, Admiral Voss said, his gaze settling on her. Your tactical assessment? She stood, her movements carrying the same fluid grace as always, but her words came from a place she'd never accessed before. Admiral, I believe our understanding of human motivation is flawed. We've been treating them as if they operate on pure logic, but their actions are driven by emotional attachments that make them unpredictable and formidable. A subtle shift in the room's atmosphere suggested her words had struck a discordant note. Sub-Commander Kelrick's exchanged glances with other officers, their expressions reflecting confusion and concern. Elaborate, Admiral Voss commanded, his tone carrying a warning edge. The humans don't fight for territory or resources alone. Zinara continued, feeling as if she were stepping off a cliff. They fight for concepts we've dismissed as primitive. Honor, love, the protection of those who cannot protect themselves. This makes them willing to accept casualties we would consider unacceptable. You speak as if this is advantageous, the Admiral replied coldly. In a way, it is. When facing extinction, humans become exponentially more dangerous. They will sacrifice everything for their families, their ideals, their species' survival. We've been trying to break their will, but we've been attacking the wrong targets. Admiral Voss moved closer, his towering presence casting a shadow over her. Are you suggesting we cannot defeat them? I'm suggesting we may not understand what defeat means to them, Zinara replied, her voice steady despite the growing tension. They view death in service of their loved ones as victory. They celebrate soldiers who die protecting others. We may destroy their ships, but we cannot break their spirit. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Then, Admiral Voss spoke, his words carrying deadly intent. War Commander, your recent interactions with the human prisoner have clearly compromised your judgment. You will report to medical for immediate neural realignment. No, Zinara said, the word surprising even herself. I will not. The collective intake of breath from the assembled officers was audible. In Zephyrian society, direct disobedience was virtually unknown. You forget yourself, Commander, Admiral Voss said, his hand moving to his sidearm. You are experiencing emotional contamination. This is a treatable condition. What if it's not contamination? Zinara asked, her voice gaining strength. What if it's evolution? What if feeling something beyond cold logic makes us better, not worse? Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The tactical display flickered to life, showing the human fleet emerging from hyperspace in a formation that defied conventional wisdom. Instead of the expected coordinated assault, individual human ships were breaking off to engage Zephyrian vessels in what appeared to be suicide runs. They're targeting our command ships, Calrix reported, his voice tight with disbelief. They're sacrificing their own vessels to create openings for others. Zinara watched the display with growing understanding. They're not being reckless. They're being human. Each ship that sacrifices itself is buying time for the others to complete their mission. As the battle unfolded, she realized with Crystal clarity that she had to make a choice between the cold logic of her people and the warm chaos of human emotion. The decision would define not just her future, but the future of both species. Love conquers all. The battle for the Arcturus system raged across the void like a symphony of destruction and desperate hope. Captain Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the commandeered Zephyrian shuttle, his hands working frantically at unfamiliar controls while explosions bloomed like deadly flowers against the starfield beyond. He'd been freed from his cell when Zinara had made her choice, but the cost of that decision was becoming clear with each passing moment. Marcus, Zinara said from the co-pilot's seat, her luminous eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Admiral's flagship is moving to intercept the human evacuation ships. If they reach the colony transports, thousands of families die, Marcus finished grimly, including mine. The shuttle shuddered as plasma fire lanced past their hull. Zinara's fingers danced across the crystalline controls with inhuman speed. But Marcus could see the exhaustion in her movements. Since choosing to help him escape, she'd been fighting not just external enemies, but the fundamental programming of her own species. Why? He asked suddenly, his voice cutting through the chaos around them. Why risk everything for people you barely know? Zinara was quiet for a moment, her attention seemingly focused on piloting through the debris field of a destroyed frigate. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a wonder that seemed alien to her own ears. Because I watched you speak to your family, she said softly. I saw how your entire being transformed when you saw them. The joy, the pain, the love, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever witnessed. And I realized that in all my centuries of existence, I had never felt anything so powerful. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. Zinara, my people pride themselves on efficiency, on the elimination of wasteful emotion, she continued, her voice growing stronger. But watching you, I understood that what we call waste might actually be the most precious thing in the universe. The willingness to sacrifice everything for those we love. The shuttle's proximity alarm screamed as Admiral Voss's flagship, the Dominion Eternal, appeared on their screen. The massive vessel's weapons arrays were charging, their target clearly the defenseless colony ships struggling to reach the hyperspace jump points. We can't stop that thing, Marcus said, running calculations in his head. It's too big, too heavily armed. Zinara's hands stilled on the controls. We don't have to stop it. We just have to slow it down. Before Marcus could process her words, she was changing course, angling the shuttle directly toward the Dominion Eternal's primary weapon batteries. The realization hit him like a physical blow. No, he said, reaching for her hands. There has to be another way. She turned to look at him, and in her eyes, he saw something that took his breath away. It was the same expression he'd worn when, speaking to his family, the look of someone who had found something worth dying for. Marcus, she said, her voice gentle but certain, I finally understand what you meant about love making us dangerous. I love you. I love your species' stubborn refusal to give up. I love the way you fight for strangers and die for dreams. And because I love these things, I can do what logic never could. The shuttle accelerated toward the massive flagship, its small form dwarfed by the crystalline colossus ahead. Marcus felt tears on his face as he understood what she was planning. Navigation core, he said. If we overload it near their main reactor, the explosion will cripple their weapons array long enough for your people to escape, Zinara finished. It's not logical. It's not efficient, but it's right. As they approached the point of no return, Marcus reached out and took her hand. Her skin was warm, more human than alien in that moment. I love you too, he said simply. The shuttle impacted the Dominion Eternal's hull in a burst of light that briefly outshone the system's star. The massive ship's weapons flickered and died, its power grid cascading into failure. In the precious minutes that followed, the human colony ships completed their jump to hyperspace, carrying thousands of families to safety. Among the survivors were Marcus's wife and daughter. They would grow up in a universe forever changed by a Zephyrian commander who learned that love was not weakness, but the strongest force in the galaxy. Later, when the history of the First Contact War was written, scholars would debate the tactical significance of the Battle of Arcturus. But Marcus Kane and War Commander Zinara had already won the only victory that mattered. They had proven that love could bridge the gap between worlds, species, and even life and death itself. Their sacrifice became the foundation for the peace. That followed a reminder that in a universe of infinite darkness, the light of love would always find a way to shine.